So we'll cover today, like I said, choosing the right tools for research, kind of landscape, right? I'm going to introduce you to at least some of you who haven't heard it or haven't worked with it before, the SciSpace platform and the agent, and I'll switch to the website, and I'll walk you through some of those steps. I'll show you some of the features. There's many features that we will, and many of them we will not be able to cover today because there's just that many. But I'm going to talk about the most important ones, as in the most useful ones to me. You might find some other aspects of it more useful to yourself, and that's totally fine. And I was happy to see that most of you are either writing literature review or writing the papers, the actual writing part. So that will hopefully be useful to you as well, what I'm going to be talking about today. So the hands-on part is walk you through the literature discovery kind of review part that SciSpace can really help partially automate. And when I say automate, by the way, I like to use this analogy like when you step into an airplane to travel somewhere, when we have pilots, right, who pilot the plane, but actually most of the flight is managed by the autopilot, right, which is a machine. So one could argue, well, if 80–90% of the flight is the autopilot, why do we need pilots? Well, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't feel very safe going on an airplane without a pilot, right? At least not yet. Maybe we'll get there in 50 years. I don't know. But for now, we do need pilots because these are the people that are trained, that know what they're looking for, and they know what to avoid, and they know, special maneuvers. They're the ones, the plane taking off, the plane landing. That's the human, right? It's not the autopilot. And it's very similar in this, and when it comes to research. You're the one that has the idea. You're the one that, that the research kind of takes off. That's you. And then you work together with AI, with this machine, right, in order to facilitate the process. And at the end, you're the one that lands the plane. You're the one that makes sure that everything is done correctly. You're the one that submits the paper, right? So this hybrid workflow is what that is about. All right, so how do we integrate, how can we use SciSpace? Obviously, that's the main focus, but also how can we integrate SciSpace with other AI tools that might facilitate this workflow just a little bit, make it a little bit easier, a little bit more efficient for yourself, which again frees up time for you to think about new questions and new discoveries. And like Deepak already mentioned at the beginning, what is really important is that you maintain your own voice. So no tool should ever do the entire work for you. First of all, we're not there yet. And maybe we will get there at some point. But when you have that kind of, scenario, then again, the most critical things that will matter are creativity and critical thinking, right? So if everyone is using these tools, imagine a world like this, everyone uses these tools all the time, and all these tools are writing the papers, okay, then every single paper will read the same as every other paper, basically, in terms of tone and in terms of, the methods and how they did whatever they did. And what will really set papers or the product of science apart, whatever that product might look like in the future, is how innovative is this research design, this research question? How did you go about it, right? And how is it written? So the human component, again, I firmly believe, will become even more important as these tools develop and as these tools can do more and more aspects of this research workflow for you. So again, the goal is not to have an AI write the whole thing for you, because it's just going to read like a probably pretty boring paper in the end. So we're going to talk a little bit about maintaining academic voice, standards, and avoiding pitfalls when it comes to using these tools. So kind of what you can expect and what you really shouldn't expect. All right, so the AI landscape and the SciSpace ecosystem. When you have an idea, or actually even before you have an idea, you know that there's certain tools available, right? So I'm sure the vast majority of you, if not all of you, have used ChatGPT. Some of you might have used Gemini. Some of you might have used Claude. ChatGPT has the biggest market penetration rate. I think it's about 37%. But when it comes to businesses, for example, Claude is actually the fastest growing one. So businesses are relying more and more on Claude and less on ChatGPT, because each of these tools have their own advantages, their own benefits. And so they can do certain aspects much better than the other tools. I use all of them. So it's a lot of my monthly budget goes towards all these tools, just because I find them useful for certain aspects. And I kind of want to keep being, in the know when it comes to new features. So that's kind of like a hobby, I guess you could call it nowadays. Then there's other tools which some of you might use as well, like Grammarly, which you might be very familiar with, that are really useful to help you kind of polish your writing style. And they make suggestions as to how you can restructure a sentence and replace some words and so on. I always advise all my students, always run your paper through Grammarly, always, before you submit it. And whenever I finish a paper, I'm looking at about 200 things that Grammarly points out, and that's not with the paid version necessarily. So there's a lot of small things, inconsistencies, let's say, grammatical errors. Here's a comma missing and there. Anyway, very, very useful for that. But obviously super specialized, right? For a very, very niche task. And then there's specialized research AI tools. So this ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, these are generalist AIs. These are basically tools that allow you to do a lot of different things, but not one thing really, really well. And that's what SciSpace is. So SciSpace is specifically designed for an academic research workflow. It's grounded in scholarly databases, and it's very much focused on accuracy and traceability. So every single claim is accompanied by a citation, and you can click on the citation, you're going to open the paper, and I'll show you what that looks like. And you can verify that for yourself if you wish to. And I do advise you do, but that is not usually the case with any of these ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini tools, right? Which doesn't mean they're not useful. They're very much useful, and we'll talk about how you would integrate them, or at least how I integrate them in my workflow. But in terms of making sure that whatever paper you find is accurate, talks about the topic that you are interested in, substantiates the claim that you read in the end, that is not a feature of these generalist AI tools. So you would really have to rely on the specialized research AI tools, such as SciSpace. Right, so introducing the SciSpace platform, the really biggest advantage of SciSpace, apart from the agent, which really brings everything together, is that, at least in my opinion, it's created in order to have everything under one roof. All right, so everything, all the tools you might need in like one setting, so you don't have to constantly switch back and forth. So it's an end-to-end platform. The foundation is that the AI interacts directly with literature, and doesn't make things up, like fake citations or claims that are actually unsubstantiated based on the paper that is cited. That doesn't really happen. So it's built specifically for this purpose. So traceability is what's key, right? We need to be able to trust the information that we put out there, both for ourselves and for everyone else who's going to be reading it, because it's our reputation on the line, right? And I mean, every reputation matters above all else, and especially in this business. Apologies, I went too fast. So the core tools, some of them we'll be going over today, including literature review, workspace, the Copilot, I call it Copilot, the chat with PDF function, and the citation generator. Citation generator is not what it sounds like. It's not like just makes up citations, but rather it finds academic work that substantiates a claim that you want to make in your paper, where you might be writing something and you remember reading about this paper at some point that kind of backs up the claim you're making, but you can't for the life of you remember where or what that paper was. So you could use a tool like the citation generator to hopefully find that paper that you were looking for. All right. And like I said, the agent is was recently launched. I think it was about 2 months ago in July, I believe. So that is the kind of amalgamation of all these different functions, the literature review, workspace, the chat with PDF, everything kind of one tool that you can use. All right, and that's what it looks like here on the right. And I'm going to be switching to the website here shortly to walk you through some of it. So the SciSpace agent, again, we're moving from generative AI to really this kind of specialized tool that we can use for this specific purpose. All right. So we want a tool that not only, you give it a prompt, like say, hey, find me this, right? So there's a goal in mind. And that's usually where these generative AI tools, these generalist AI tools end. Like you give it a tool and then it will spit out an answer for you, for sure. But it doesn't actually work through a plan. It doesn't come up with a plan. Like, okay, so look, here's a prompt, here's the goal, this is what I want, all right? And be as specific as you can, obviously, all the time. But it doesn't actually plan things like, okay, let's put together a plan, and then let me start with a search, and then let me filter the results based on what is most relevant to your question. That is not a feature of this generalist AI tools. Now, there's a few options that you can use. Gemini, and I think ChatGPT has it as well. It's kind of deep search function. So that does some of that, right? But again, in terms of putting together the plan, it does do that, and the searching, but the filtering part, what is most relevant to your research question, it does tend to fall short on that. Plus, it actually doesn't just look at scientific papers, it looks at everything. So some random guy on Reddit wrote something about your topic, which, love Reddit. That's not the issue here, but it's just some person's opinion. That's not a consensus that you can rely on. So it doesn't do that. It's not designed for that. And I always kind of have to laugh when people get angry at using ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, whatever it is. It's like, well, the stupid thing is not doing what I want it to do. Well, it's not designed to do what you want it to do. It's like getting mad at Excel because you can't do what you can do in Word, right? It just doesn't have that function. Like, why are you getting angry about it? Why are you getting frustrated? So use the tools that are actually designed for this very purpose, because, I mean, that's what they were designed to do, right? So that's the whole point of this agent, right? So to do this goal, plan, search, filter, all of it by itself. So the only thing you have to do is give it the goal, and I will show you an example of what this looks like here shortly, and it will work through everything. And you can interrupt it, which is really, really great, because you might have forgotten to specify something in the first prompt, and you start seeing your credits go down, because obviously it's based on credits, based on the amount of work that it takes. And then you kind of have to start from the beginning. You can actually interrupt it, which is really, really useful. All right, so I'm going to show you what this looks like here now. I'm going to input a goal. I'm going to do a literature review question, prompt, if you will. And we're going to have the agent execute it. So this is already done, yeah, because it takes a while. And I'm going to just show you what that looks like, right? And I'm going to go through the output. This is actually even better, because now we're on the actual page. This is the page that you would see, right? So when you go on SciSpace.com, you have this wonderful landing page, right? And it starts with the agent. This is the agent, okay? So you can just give the task that you're working on. You can see down here that there's loads of tasks you can do. And you click on show more, and there's more. So this is not just it. There's a lot more. You can do literature review. You can review literature. You can review your own writing. You can do like a peer review my paper. You can extract data from papers. I'm going to show you that here briefly as well. Find grants, really, really useful for that. You can specify which kind of source you want to use. You can also make a website, PowerPoint presentations. You can make Word documents, PDF reports, interactive apps. There's loads of things you can do. I'm just going to show you one example that I ran a few days ago. I'm going to scroll up here. So I gave it a very, very general prompt conduct a comprehensive literature review based on the Prisma framework. And you can see I even forgot to write the A in Prisma, it's no problem, on organizational resilience and employee well-being. It's a random topic, okay? And it correctly identifies as a Prisma framework. And then this is the agent, okay? And it asks for a plan now. Like, okay, so here's what I'm using this royally here, what we can do. And let me ask you a few clarifying questions. So I didn't put that in the actual prompt. And in my experience, in fact, like usually people say be as specific as possible. I agree with that, but not as a first step. As a first step, if you have an idea and you just want to see, hey, what literature is out there on this topic, on organizational resilience and employee well-being, just to see what's kind of out there, what has already been done. Don't start with a super specific question. Start with very broad, okay? Just like you would in an academic paper, kind of introduction, you start with broader and then kind of funnel to the actual question that you want. You just get an idea, start broad, all right? So very, very broad prompt here, all right? So just what's the relationship between these two variables? And it asks me questions. Specific focus. What's the most important aspect that you're interested in? Is it about psychological resilience? Is it about organizational support systems? So more about structure, more about the individual. And what's the ultimate goal of the literature review? What do you want to do with this, right? What should it look like in the end? That's essentially what it's asking. And then the contextual scope, should the review focus on specific industries, types, geographical regions, whatever you want, right? And then the temporal focus. So how far back do you want me to go with this literature review? Do you want to like look at the last 5 years? You want to look at the last 10 years, 20 years? You want to look at post-pandemic, pre-pandemic? And then I give it some more clarification. And you can see this is for demonstration purposes, but it is pretty short in terms of my actual feedback. Yes, I'm interested in psychological resilience factors. I want to use this literature review to understand the theoretical frameworks and possible moderators between resilience and employee well-being. So what kind of other variables help explain this relationship? Global multinational corporations is what I'm mostly interested in. It doesn't mean that it will not list your results outside of that, but it will focus on whatever you tell it to. And then the recent developments, let's say recent in terms of academic terms, last 10 years. All right. And then it starts. So it starts multi-step process. I didn't specify that. It does it on its own. And here's a quick summary, right? And then at the end, and at the end of that summary, you actually start the actual work. So it found 250 relevant papers that are related, and you can expand this here and you can read about it in more detail. So this is kind of the thinking steps, right? It found 250 papers, 49 relevant papers specifically, then 35 relevant papers for the cultural influences, 45 papers for psychological resilience factors, which is what I told it I'm most interested in, right? Then it looks at the title and the abstract of all these papers to kind of get a deeper understanding of what the paper is about. And this goes on and on and on. I didn't have to do anything here, right? It's still going. And then at the end, it says, I've successfully completed a comprehensive review. Here's what I found, key deliverables, right? Major findings, psychological capital. Remember, we were interested in moderators. There's also some mediators, apparently, which I didn't specify. So we have thriving as a mediator, and we have resilience as a mediator between organizational supports and well-being. Cultural context matters, leadership is critical. At the end of this, so you're like, okay, but where's my literature review? You can click on this here, down here, or you can just click on outputs and you see all the outputs. And so the literature review ought to be here. All right. So this is the task, essentially. This is the prompt. And then this is the abstract. What did it do? Right, 90 initially identified records, 85 papers remained after deduplication. And then here's your actual literature review, if you will. So there's a question there in the chat. What prompt is recommended for a review? If that's not necessarily systematic. Yeah, it doesn't have to be systematic. That could be used for areas other than medicine, such as social science or humanities. So in terms of what prompt is recommended, it doesn't really matter as much for the exact words that you use. It's more about what are the variables that you're interested in. Okay, so just be specific about that. I would suggest start broad. So let that run first, and then you will see what is the output, and then parts of the output might trigger a new idea that you have, and then you can further specify that. Obviously, this is a more expensive option to do it this way. If you know exactly what you're looking for, go for it. All right, that's totally fine. But if you don't know exactly, then do this kind of broad prompt first, and then funnel down, make it more specific as you go. And then here we have the methods, so what it actually went through in terms of the literature review and how did it decide which studies to include, which studies to exclude, right? So all of this is here. Here you have all the variables that are specified. The mediators are down here, moderation effects. And you have a short discussion on the matter. And you have all the references down here, all right? And then you have checklist as well. So you have all these files here that actually are specific to the individual aspects that it researched. So cultural moderation, analysis, you have the introduction, the theoretical background, and so on and so on. So lots and lots of information. You also have this, this table that is then automatically generated, which essentially replaces, and that's actually one of my next slides, replaces the Excel matrix that you have to build, or you don't have to build it, but I recommend you do, especially when you're doing a systematic literature review, with all the frameworks that were identified in the papers, right? And then the source of the paper. So all of that is down here as well. Then resilience factors, moderators, and so on and so on and so on. The really cool thing about this, and then it gives you follow-up suggestions, right? So what else do you want to do with this? Okay, so here's some suggestions. And I say, all right, so now that I have an idea about what is out there on this topic, I want you to write, so this is all within the agent, you don't have to click anywhere else, right? A coherent introduction and theoretical background section for an empirical paper targeting an organizational psychology journal. Okay, so I'm not saying which journal, you can, if you have a specific journal in mind, but this is for demonstration purposes, right? So all of that, use all of the things that you have just found and generated for me, which I know are backed up because you have all the references here. You can click on each of these and actually write the intro and the theory background. So basically the theory background in an empirical paper is everything up to the methods, yeah? And it starts, all right? And at the end of this, you know, you have your introduction here, right? Research problem and significance, research objectives, theory background, and each claim is backed up by a reference, okay? And I didn't say use APA 7th, which is the formatting, the reference formatting style that is usually used in psychology journals, but it automatically inferred that because I said targeting an organizational psychology journal, and all the different theoretical the theories that can help explain the relationships between the variables I was interested in, the resilience and the employee well-being, mediating mechanisms, moderating factors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you can see that there's, in fact, a lot more literature that was previously not in the kind of executive summary is now here because it did find those papers, right? And you can click on each of these, or you can, you know, copy paste it and open it up separately. And verify it if you want. I have not come across a fake citation using SciSpace agent, which is quite the accomplishment to be able to say that, right? The accomplishment by SciSpace, not by me, because this happens all the time with Claude, with Gemini. ChatGPT is even worse, in my opinion, when it comes to this. So this has not happened to me. It doesn't mean that it's never going to happen, but in terms of the references, they're all real, in my experience. Now, they might not be exactly on the topic that you want it to be, but it's going to be on an adjacent topic, all right, at the very most. Then you have your, again, follow-up suggestions. This is endless, the follow-up suggestions. And then I clicked on one of these and I was like, yeah, let's do an actual deep read, because now that I know more about it, read what you have generated here. All right, so now conduct a focused analysis on the cultural moderators. That's what I want to. I want to take this paper into that direction. I'm really interested in the cultural moderators. So it did the same thing that it did at the beginning. All right, finding papers, now more specified. Now we start broad and going down the funnel. And it gives me at the very end of this what it calls an enhanced theoretical background. All right. A couple of questions in the chat. Can it explore your data sets and make suggestions? Yes, it can, albeit I would not. Suggestions, yes. I would not use this for analysis, but suggestions, yes. Is it possible to have access to the output once we exited? Yeah, of course. You can download it here. Otherwise, I mean, I know this is a common issue, right? But especially with ChatGPT. So I can download it here. I can just copy it. Okay. I can download all the files if you want. So yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, it's like one more step that you have to take care of. So a lot of stuff. Yeah, how do you track the credits? The credits are down here. So the highest, the premium one is, I think it's called premium anyway. You start with 5,500 credits per month. And so this task did not take 2,000 credits. I did several things, all right? But you can always see the number of credits remaining here. Okay. All right. So this is pretty cool, right? I mean, you can have a very, very quick, in minutes, we're talking 15 minutes or something, you can have a fully fledged, maybe not fully, but a 80% fledged overview of the variables you're interested in, of the topic you're interested in, without having to search papers manually. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Obviously, in terms of the references, you would still have to go through them, and I suggest you do in the end, to make sure that they are all the kind of references you're interested in. As in, are they all, some of us are limited in terms of the journals rankings that our school uses, our university uses, and so certain journals count and certain journals don't count. And so if you want to have only the top journals, obviously you would have to go through the reference list and make sure that, yeah, are all of these, considered top journals, or are some of them, lower tier journals? I personally don't have any issue with lower tier journals at all. I think really innovative ideas don't tend to get published in really top tier journals immediately, right? They usually start getting published in lower tier journals. And then once the idea becomes a little bit more mainstream, then it actually is published in a top tier journal. So I would recommend, as long as the reference that is cited here at the bottom is relevant to the topic that you have put in your prompt, you should definitely include it. That's just my personal take. Do with that whatever you want. Right? You can disagree, it's fine. All right. So this is the biggest function, the biggest benefit for me of the SciSpace agent. You can do everything in one place. You don't have to go through. So I never switched the tab. I never went anywhere else on any other website, right? To get to this point at the end where I had what looks like, a pretty good overview of introduction, theory background, variables, moderators, mediators, identified in prior literature. I didn't have to go anywhere else, which doesn't mean that, this is it and you stop and you're done. It's not. But in terms of this step, this is all you need to do, right? So the second aspect, and I can show you that briefly as well, it's much more straightforward, is this discovery to data extraction, all right? So actually, no, I already showed you this. This is the Excel table. So you get this table in the end with the theory background, what they found, and then the authors. So you can generate a large table at the end. And you can, if it doesn't do that automatically, usually it does, you can ask it to do that, and it will generate a full table for you. So then you can have everything in one kind of spot, and then you can go through the table and say, okay, so what are the kind of commonalities here, right? And you can also ask the agent to find the commonalities if you want. So once you have the table. So this replaces the kind of copy pasting stuff into Excel afterwards, so that you know which papers you actually went through. When it comes to literature review, especially, I think that's really that's really relevant time saving that you're doing here. And the third part is the chat with PDF function. All right. So I know there's questions in the Q&A. I'm going to go through the presentation first, and I'm happy to answer all the questions that remain. That's no problem. Just in terms of the interest of time, I just want to make sure we get through all this, so Deepak doesn't get too frustrated with me. All right. So this chat with PDF function is essentially where you upload a paper. And by the way, when you upload anything, it stays in your user space. It doesn't get used to train models. It doesn't get shared anywhere else. It stays, it's just linked to your profile. That's it. Okay. So it is safe in that regard, which doesn't mean you should upload things that you know you shouldn't be uploading, but especially when it comes to a published paper, it's published, right? That you upload, that you can use this chat with PDF function to basically like interrogate the paper, okay? So I had this, it's over here, and you can make this a little bit larger, chat with PDF. And I had done this already, as in I had it loaded, but let me actually try a sample PDF because it's faster. Okay, title folder. All right, this is a sample paper, all right? So you would upload the PDF. And so this is a PDF. Now in this case, so I don't know the paper, it's a sample paper, right? But you can use this, look at all these functions here. Like generate a summary of the paper, that's the easiest part. What are the results of the paper, right? What are the conclusions? And you can put in your own questions as well. Like, I don't know, what are the contributions of this paper? So when you, especially once you've read papers yourself and you've read, let's say 10 of them, and you don't remember, you know there was something in this one paper, but you cannot recall what was the contribution that you wanted to include in the paper you're writing, in literary review you're writing, you can use this function, right? So what are the contributions of the paper, and it shows it to you, all right? And you can click on this and it can locate it within the PDF where the actual contribution was made. So it will scroll down and it will highlight whenever this thing loads. Which might be, again, due to my browser settings, but it gives you all the information right here. Okay, so pretty cool to be able, and you can go on doing this endlessly, basically. You can keep asking questions. By the way, one thing that I forgot that is related to this step that you can do here when you're doing the literature review, when you're using the agent, when you're using the agent, you can upload PDFs as well. So you can, here are your credits again, you can click on this and you can upload, I think it's about up to 10 files. So if you have identified papers already that you know are really relevant, you can upload them here, and as a kind of basis, right, a foundation on which you want the agent to conduct a literature review. You can do that absolutely as well. And in fact, that has been really useful depending on where you are in the paper writing process. So if you're already well into it, you've already identified like 10, 15 papers, and you're just starting with the SciSpace agent, might be a good idea to include them because you're giving the agent more information, more context. And so the output will be much more relevant. The more context you can give it, the better, usually, right? So some of those questions, like we just saw, right? Why did the authors choose this statistical method? So what they say, what's their argument, right? What are the implications of this table? So use it to interpret a table, which goes to the question that was asked earlier. Can I use this to interrogate data sets? Yes, you can, right? All right, so let's talk about the hybrid workflow, which is really where the magic happens. So where SciSpace is a lot of cool things, and all these aspects, like all the different findings, you can also put it into a notebook. So they have notebooks on their page. That is basically a centralized page to help you store highlights and things that you know are relevant for the paper that you're writing, right, and your own analysis. And you can then integrate those. You can extract the references out of it and put it into Zotero or whatever else reference manager you're using. what you should really avoid is a summary graveyard. So like kind of have lots and lots of summaries from different papers, but that they don't go anywhere. Like you don't actually do anything. This is also related to writing the paper. As an editor, I really don't like it when, and I know a lot of colleagues share this view, when you have a paper that basically just the entire like introduction up to the methods, so the literature review part as well, it's just summaries of previous papers on this topic. So Gruda et al. 2010 said this, and Gruda et al. 2020 said this. But fine, but like you need to integrate these things. Like, why are you summarizing all this stuff? So then it's just a bunch of summaries. It's not really relevant. So again, you can use the agent to streamline this information and integrate it, better together, so that it actually forms an argument where each paragraph builds on the previous paragraph. That's really, really useful when it comes to the actual reader experience. Okay, so what's the strategy here? So now we talked about SciSpace, right? So SciSpace gives you kind of this gather the evidence, like what's out there, literature review, discovery phase, and helps you build your argument, all right? High accuracy, and it's grounded in academic literature. Now, it might not include only the papers that you want it to, as in the source, the journal of the paper where it was published. It will include other papers that are relevant, certainly, that you might disagree with where they were published. Fine, you can take those out. But they are all grounded in literature. And that's a really, really key distinction. That's what makes this worthwhile, really. I mean, so much worthwhile. And then what do you do with this? So you have this kind of generated intro and theory background. You can take that now, if you want, and you can put it into a tool, a generalist AI tool, which are really good at rewriting things and summarizing things, right? And use it to improve the writing, all right? So you take the structured outline of what you've just generated with SciSpace and all the evidence, so what it actually wrote, right, the output, and ask it to draft prose, to polish the language, to make it clearer, make it easier to understand, right? And to improve transitions. So this is what I was saying, and you can use prompts like, make sure that each paragraph builds on the previous paragraph, so that the argument flows from one paragraph to the next. You will still have to do editing. Like, that's not going away. You remember, you're the pilot. Okay, the autopilot can do a lot, but you still got to intervene. And then you still have to do the references stuff, right? But because you can extract references and put them in a reference manager from SciSpace into Zotero, whatever you're using, that step is drastically improved as well in terms of the amount of time it takes. So refinement and verification, this is the editing part, yeah? So the best experience, both user experience and in terms of the outputs or reader experience, is when you have human and AI work together. That's my personal conviction. We also wrote a paper which is going to be published soon on this very topic, that this is what at least like meta-analyses have found. It's only been like less than 5 years on this with these technologies, right? So it's very, very early. But for now, at least, human plus AI, if you know what you're doing, okay, which is hopefully what this webinar will contribute to, so much better than just AI, for sure, because it's going to go off on random things and it's going to include things that are not relevant. And it's also better than average human. Now, it might not be better than expert human, but in terms of the amount of time you save, it is drastically better. So now imagine you have an expert human researcher, an expert in the area, plus these tools. Imagine the possibilities. So lastly, it's like maintaining academic, it's not the last slide, but lastly, maintaining academic voice. So it's a supporter, it's not an author, right? It really is good at synthesis, like extract information and relate information to each other, different pieces of information. But you are the one doing the critical analysis. You are the one giving the original contribution. That is you. That is your responsibility, right? So use AI to draft literature reviews or methods, but ensure that what it actually reflects in the end strongly is about your unique argument that you're trying to make, right? The SciSpace also has an AI detector, which you can use to make sure it doesn't sound very machine generated. But in my experience, as you keep doing this and you have some practice, and this is just, trial and error, you just try it out and you will get better at it, just like with everything else. You will soon be able to identify and differentiate between, that doesn't sound very good, or that sounds like it sounds not human, right? And so you can just easily fix that yourself, or you can give it another prompt to fix it. So you don't necessarily need additional tools for this, but you can, and they are available for you to use. So what I'd like you to take away from this kind of very quick overview is, I think these tools allow us as researchers, and we're supposed to be critical thinkers, right, to shift our role from drafter to director and critical thinking, right? So the critical thinking part is not going away. That's always been there. It's going to continue being there. But spending a ton of time on drafting, at least, and this is very much discipline dependent, at least in my discipline, you can save a lot of time there if the research design that you've come up with, the research question you've come up with, is interesting and innovative. So this critical thinking is all you. You are the director, but you can use these tools to do the job you still have to do. You still have to write the paper. You still have to, put your knowledge out there. Dissemination of knowledge is part of a very big part of our job. So that still needs to happen, right? So responsibilities and pitfalls, we already talked about most of these things. Over-reliance. Do not over-rely on any one tool. Okay, so treating AI output as a final product is a very bad idea. Not just because it's unethical, or it's because there might be inconsistencies like hallucinations, right? Which is the next point. But rather just because it just doesn't read all that well. Like if this is it, like you do your SciSpace, process, you follow to the end, and it's like copy, put it in a manuscript, off we go, we're done here, and you add the methods and results. That's not going to cut it for a really good journal. It might cut it for a very not even lower tier, like lowest tier journal. For sure it will cut it, but I mean, we're not talking about that. We're talking about high quality contributions, right? So that's not enough. And reviewers either will be able to see through it, or they just won't like it, and they won't be able to tell you why they don't like it. They will say, well, this just doesn't make sense. It's just, I don't understand what's going on here. So there's a lot of editing involved. You will know your just like your data that you work with intimately, basically in the end, because you go through it so many times. You will know your paper really, really well in the end, because it is your paper, even though you use different tools to get to the end point. It's still all you, and you better know all your paper, because there's going to be questions, right, from reviewers. So don't over-rely, right? Hallucinations, we already talked about that. It is, I would say, severely minimized in SciSpace. So again, I haven't come across one, which doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I'm sure it does happen at some point. So you still need to verify key claims, all right? But if you know the literature extensively, then when you're reading it that, wait, these people didn't say that. Like, I know they didn't say that because I know them personally, right? Or I've read their work. So it's much easier when you know the literature really well. Then obviously these tools are really good for efficiency, and you can easily spot things that just that doesn't sound right and correct it. Remember, you're the pilot. Don't forget, somebody's flying this plane. All right, losing your voice. So that we don't want that to happen. We don't want just an AI synthesis. There's companies that do this. They provide AI synthesized reports. Fine, that's what they're selling. That's not your job, okay? So it needs to reflect your analysis. It needs to reflect your argument. And remember, AI models, just like humans, we have biases, and they might have biases in terms of which papers were identified in the literature, and therefore which papers form the foundation of the literature review section. So when I use this word literature review section, I mean intro to methods, okay, in an empirical paper. So you need to really maintain a critical awareness. You need to remember that you're the pilot, and you need to maybe look at all these references, and not just maybe, and go through them, just read through them to make sure that, look, are these all relevant seemingly relevant. And if you find one that doesn't seem all that relevant, open it up, go through it. Use the chat with PDF function, right, to interrogate it a little bit, to see, do they actually back up this claim that I'm trying to make here? So again, you're going to be working a lot. That it's not going anywhere. But in terms of how you work, I think that can be drastically improved. So verify everything. The traceability features are great because you can click on every single claim and you can see the reference, the citation, the paper that is linked to. Transparency, disclose AI use and methods and acknowledgements as per journal requirements. And the publisher guidelines. Really read those thoroughly, please, because there's drastic differences between some of those. Like Elsevier has a much more, let's say, realistic expectation about AI use, and like Wiley, for example, is much more restrictive, which doesn't mean you cannot use it as an author. You can, but in terms of the requirements when it comes to reporting and things like that, are just vastly different. So just always be transparent. You are the scholar. The final contribution is yours. It cannot be anybody else's. Maybe co-authors, but that's it. All right. So the key takeaways, and then we can do a quick Q&A. The SciSpace agent allows you or empowers you to automate complex multi-step workflows, right? So the step 1, step 2, step 3, and then it asks you questions. And like I said before, although I didn't show it to you, you can interrupt it. So it starts the process and it's been going on for about 4 minutes. It's like, oh, I forgot to include this one variable that I was really interested in. Shoot, now I have to wait. No, you don't. Put it in the prompt and submit it. Basically, it will pause, it will take that into account, and it will continue. Okay? So that's really, really useful. Just like you would be having a conversation with another human being and they're talking, like you said, hey, can you work on this? And you're sitting next to each other and the other person starts working. It's like, oh, I forgot. Can you include that as well? And they're like, oh, yeah, of course. And then they continue. It's kind of similar. So the platform provides grounded, traceable insights, right? So it's kind of grounded AI in that sense. So it's grounded in the literature. And this hybrid approach that I showed you today leverages the strengths of specialized and generalized AI tools. One other step that perhaps you could include as well that I didn't talk about is you can use AI tools like ChatGPT voice. It's really good for this. There's also better tools when it comes to voice, like sesame.com. This is like a preview. They are not fully launched yet. It's really like human-like conversation. So if you just want to spitball ideas, you have a research idea possibly, but you're not sure, and you don't want to bother your colleagues with this because it might be a ridiculous idea to begin with. When you have many ideas, it's bound that some of them are really ridiculous. You can have this conversation. There's an actual conversation, like voice, and like 10-minute conversation about a topic. And then, first of all, you might have some greater clarity in the end, but also you can take that output and put it into Claude or Gemini, whatever, and have it summarize that. I can use that part of your prompt to then launch the literature review, all right, discovery phase. All right,